"Be my husband for 6 months," Victoria Sterling said, standing beside her father's old Rolls-Royce Phantom, "and I'll make sure your daughter never worries about money again." Everybody in that private carriage house looked at me like I should have thanked her on my knees. They saw a black single dad in a grease-stained work shirt, a mechanic from a one-bay garage on the south side. They didn't see the man my daughter Ava still believed in. On day 179, I was upstairs packing her little blue bag when Victoria found the old brass key in my hand. It had one number carved into it: 179. By sunrise, that tiny key would expose a hidden secret inside her billionaire family, destroy the man trying to steal her company, and make me walk away from the richest woman I had ever met. But first, you need to understand why I almost said yes. My name is Malcolm Reed, and for most of my life, I believed that if a man worked hard enough with his hands, he could fix almost anything. Almost. My garage sat on a narrow street on the south side of Chicago, squeezed between an old tire shop and a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon before sunrise. It wasn't much to look at. One repair bay. A small office. A faded sign that needed repainting. But it was mine. I specialized in restoring classic luxury cars, old Bentleys, vintage Rolls-Royces, and the occasional Porsche that wealthy collectors trusted to very few people. Rich people often arrived in expensive suits and left surprised when they realized the man rebuilding their six-figure cars lived in a small apartment above the shop. That apartment was home to two people: me and my daughter, Ava. She was 11 years old, smarter than I had any right to expect, and stubborn enough to remind me of her mother every single day, especially at breakfast. "Dad, you're thinking too loud again," she told me one morning while pouring cereal. I laughed. Thinking too loud. "You get that face." "What face?" "The worried face." She pointed her spoon at me like a lawyer presenting evidence. I couldn't argue with that. The truth was, money had been tighter than I wanted her to know. The garage paid the bills, but barely. Restoration work took time, and time didn't always pay on schedule. Still, I never wanted Ava to feel poor, because after losing her mother, she had already lost enough. My wife, Danielle, died 7 years earlier after a sudden illness. 1 month we were planning a family vacation. The next month I was learning how to braid a little girl's hair by watching videos at 2 in the morning. Some nights, after Ava went to sleep, I sat alone in the garage staring at unfinished engines, not because the cars needed work, because grief does strange things to a man. Sometimes fixing something mechanical feels easier than facing something broken inside yourself. Ava knew more than I realized. One afternoon, she handed me a folded birthday card she had made months before. I kept it inside my toolbox. Across the front, written in purple marker, were 5 words: "Dad, you're my safe place." I carried that card everywhere, not because it was paper, because it was a promise. Every decision I made started with the same question: what's best for Ava? I didn't know it then, but that question was about to collide with the strangest offer I had ever received. And it would begin with a billionaire CEO, a forgotten Rolls-Royce, and a proposal no working man expects to hear. The first time I met Victoria Sterling, I was lying on a creeper underneath a 1967 Bentley. My phone rang 3 times before I finally answered. A woman introduced herself as an executive assistant and asked if I could inspect a vehicle at Sterling Estate. I almost said no. People with estates usually expected miracles on impossible deadlines. Then she mentioned the car, a 1938 Rolls-Royce Phantom. That got my attention. 2 days later, I drove my old pickup through iron gates that probably cost more than my entire garage. The estate looked less like a home and more like a private kingdom. Stone buildings, perfect gardens, security guards everywhere. And parked near the main house were enough luxury cars to fill a showroom. Ferrari, Porsche, Lamborghini, a brand new Rolls-Royce. The kind of collection rich people buy when money stops meaning anything. I noticed something else too. The looks. Some of the staff smiled politely. Others looked confused. A black mechanic stepping out of an aging pickup truck didn't seem to fit their picture of someone invited to Sterling Estate. One man asked if I was there to make a delivery. Another pointed me toward a service entrance. I had experienced worse, so I ignored it. Eventually, I was escorted to a private carriage house behind the mansion. That's where I saw the phantom. The old Rolls-Royce sat beneath a cover, untouched by time but somehow wounded by it. Dust covered the chrome. The tires had flattened, yet even standing still, the car carried a certain dignity. Some machines do that. They remind you they were important long before you arrived. Can you fix it? The voice came from behind me. I turned and saw Victoria Sterling, 41, confident, elegant, the kind of woman who entered a room already expecting people to listen. She didn't offer a handshake. Instead, she studied me the way investors study risk. I can inspect it, I said. That's not what I asked. I looked back at the phantom. Maybe? That answer seemed to annoy her. Most people around her probably said yes immediately. Victoria crossed her arms. I was told you're the best restorer in Chicago. I've been called worse. For the first time, I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, not quite approval. Then she said something I never expected. I need more than a mechanic. Mr. Reed. I frowned. What does that mean? She took a slow breath. In 6 months, my board will vote on the future leadership of this company. Right now, they see me as unstable, unattached, alone. I didn't like where this was going. Then she looked directly at me. Be my husband for 6 months. I thought she was joking. She wasn't, and what she said next made it clear she believed my answer could be bought. But the Rolls-Royce behind her was hiding a secret far more valuable than any contract she could offer. I said no, 3 times before I finally said yes. Not because of the money, and definitely not because of the mansion. I said yes because Victoria's proposal included something I couldn't ignore. Healthcare coverage for Ava. The kind of coverage working people dream about and rich people never think about. That night, I sat across from my daughter at our kitchen table and explained everything, at least the parts an 11-year-old needed to hear. So we're moving into a mansion, Ava asked, temporarily. Like a movie, not even close. She grinned. Do they have a pool? I laughed despite myself. Probably. That answer seemed good enough for her. A week later, we arrived at Sterling Estate with everything we owned packed into a borrowed trailer. Compared to the moving trucks that normally entered those gates, we probably looked like we were delivering furniture. The staff greeted Victoria with respect. They greeted me with caution. More than once, people assumed I was part of the maintenance crew. One woman handed me a work order before realizing who I was. She looked embarrassed. I wasn't. I've spent my whole life working with my hands. There's no shame in honest work. Still, it told me something about the world I had just entered. Most people there understood wealth. Very few understood dignity. Ava adjusted faster than I did. She made friends with the gardeners, learned the names of the horses, discovered every hidden path on the property within 3 days. Meanwhile, I focused on the Rolls-Royce. Every afternoon, after fulfilling whatever public appearance the contract required, I disappeared into the carriage house. The phantom fascinated me. Mechanically, it wasn't a difficult restoration. Old engines speak a language I understand. You listen, you observe, you respect what came before you. The problem was that some things about the car didn't make sense. Certain components had been replaced decades earlier. The repair records didn't match the vehicle. A section of interior wood paneling had been removed and reinstalled at some point. Poorly. That bothered me. People who own Rolls-Royces usually pay experts. Experts don't leave careless work behind. One evening I ran my fingers across the edge of that wooden panel. Something felt wrong. Not broken, wrong. As if someone had opened it in a hurry years ago. I examined it again under a flashlight. The screws were original. The wood was original. But faint scratch marks surrounded one corner, hidden unless you knew where to look. The car is trying to tell you something, isn't it? I turned around. Ava stood in the doorway holding a sketchbook. I smiled. Maybe. She walked closer. Mom used to say you could hear machines talking. For a moment, I couldn't answer. Then I looked back at the panel. The scratches, the unusual repairs, the feeling I couldn't explain. No, the Rolls-Royce wasn't broken. It was hiding something, and I was getting closer to finding out what. 3 weeks later, I finally opened the panel. Not because I was looking for secrets, because I was chasing a rattle. That's how most discoveries happen in my line of work. You don't find what you're looking for. You find what shouldn't be there. The carriage house was quiet that afternoon. Victoria was in New York meeting investors. Most of the staff were preparing for a charity event scheduled later that week. And Ava sat in a corner of the garage area, sketching the old Rolls-Royce in her notebook. I removed the trim piece carefully, then the wooden panel behind it. At first, I thought I had been wrong. Nothing. Just darkness. Dust. An empty cavity inside the body of the car. Then my flashlight caught something metallic. A brief flash of gold. I reached inside. My fingers closed around a small object. Cold. Heavy. Unexpected. When I pulled it into the light, I found myself staring at an old brass key. Not a modern key. Not something from the car. Something much older. Its surface was worn smooth by time. One side carried an engraved symbol I didn't recognize. The other side carried a number. Nothing else. Just 179. Ava looked up immediately. What is it? I turned the key over in my hand. I have no idea. She walked over and examined it. Maybe it's treasure. I laughed. Real life usually isn't that exciting. But even as I said it, I wasn't convinced, because something about the key bothered me. Cars don't grow keys. People hide them, especially inside places nobody would think to search. I looked back inside the compartment. There was nothing else. No note. No box. No explanation. Only the key. And the hidden space itself. Someone had built that compartment intentionally. Someone had hidden this object. Someone had wanted it forgotten. That evening, after dinner, I carried the key back to my room. The more I studied it, the stranger it became. The brass showed age. Real age. Decades, at least. And there were tiny scratches around the engraved number, as if someone had touched that part repeatedly, like the number meant something. I considered showing Victoria immediately. but I stopped myself. Not because I wanted to keep it secret, because I didn't yet understand what I had found. A mechanic learns patience. You don't replace an engine because you hear a noise. You diagnose first. I slipped the key into my pocket, the same pocket where I often carried Ava's birthday card. One promise beside one mystery. Neither seemed important at the time. Later that night, Ava knocked on my door. Dad. Yeah. She pointed toward the key on my nightstand. You know what's weird? What? The number. I smiled. Why? She shrugged. Because today is day 179. For the first time since finding the key, a chill moved down my spine. And suddenly, I wasn't sure the number was random at all. That night, I barely slept. Not because of the key itself, because of what it represented. People don't hide things unless they're afraid of losing them, or afraid of someone finding them. The old brass key sat on my nightstand while I stared at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that number. The next morning, I took the key back to the carriage house before anyone else arrived. I wanted another look at the compartment, another look at the car, another chance to understand what my instincts were trying to tell me. My father used to say something when I was young. He worked as a diesel mechanic for nearly 40 years. Machines don't lie, son. People do. Back then, I thought he was talking about engines. Years later, I realized he was talking about life. Whenever something didn't make sense, he taught me to stop listening to explanations and start following evidence. The Rolls-Royce reminded me of him. Every unusual repair, every hidden scratch, every missing detail. The car was telling a story. I just hadn't learned the language yet. While examining old maintenance records, I discovered another strange fact. The Phantom had been removed from service exactly 6 months before the death of Victoria's father, not sold, not damaged, not abandoned, simply parked and forgotten. That wasn't normal, especially for a man known to love classic automobiles. I spent most of the afternoon comparing paperwork, dates, invoices, storage records, and one date kept appearing, again and again. 179 days, different years, different documents, same number. The coincidence felt impossible. Late that evening, I returned to the estate house. Ava was waiting at the kitchen table. Homework spread everywhere. Colored pencils, science books, half-finished drawings. Normal things. The kind of things that remind a father what actually matters. You're doing the worried face again, she said. I laughed. Maybe. She reached into her backpack and handed me something folded. It was the birthday card she had given me months earlier. The one I always carried. Dad, you left it in your work jacket. I stared at the purple letters on the front. Dad, you're my safe place. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The mansion, the contract, the money, the strange key, all of it. Because no matter what happened at Sterling Estate, my first responsibility remained the same. Protect Ava. Teach Ava. Show her what kind of person a working man should be. Not by words, by choices. That realization made the mystery more dangerous. Because if the key truly pointed to something hidden inside the Sterling family, eventually I would have to decide what to do with whatever I found. And some truths don't change lives, they destroy them. Later that night, I examined the key one more time beneath a bright work lamp. That's when I noticed something I had missed before. Tiny lettering hidden near the engraved number, so faint it was almost invisible. Just 3 words. Carriage House East. Suddenly, the key wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a map, and somewhere inside Sterling Estate, something had been waiting years for someone to find it. The next morning, I waited until sunrise. Not because I was excited, because I wanted to be absolutely certain I wasn't making a mistake. The East Carriage House sat behind a row of old stone buildings near the edge of the estate. Most people ignored it. It had once stored antique carriages before the Sterling family converted it into storage decades earlier. The place smelled like dust, old wood, and forgotten history. I carried the brass key in my pocket. The same pocket that held Ava's birthday card. One mystery. One reminder of what mattered. As I stepped inside, I noticed something immediately. The building wasn't abandoned. It was organized. Too organized. Shelves lined the walls. Old photographs. Boxes of documents. Furniture covered with white sheets. Someone had preserved everything exactly as it had been left. I spent nearly an hour searching before I found it. A heavy wooden desk in the back corner. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then I noticed the lock. Old brass, same age, same wear pattern, same color as the key. My pulse quickened. I inserted the key. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting years for someone to use it. A hidden compartment opened beneath the desk. Inside sat a small steel lockbox. Nothing more. No treasure. No cash. No dramatic secret. Just a box. But sometimes the smallest objects hold the heaviest truths. The second key compartment was hidden beneath the lid. The brass key fit perfectly. The lock clicked open. Inside, I found stacks of documents, financial records, account statements, corporate reports, and on top of everything else, a sealed envelope, addressed in handwriting, for Victoria. My stomach tightened. I recognized the signature at the bottom immediately. Richard Sterling, her father, the founder of the company, the man whose Rolls-Royce had hidden the key. For several minutes I simply stared at the envelope. Part of me wanted to close the box and walk away. Another part knew I couldn't. Not anymore. I carefully opened the letter. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting remained steady. Victoria. If you are reading this, then someone finally found what I hid. Trust that person. Not because they found the key, because they cared enough to ask why it was hidden. The next paragraph changed everything. Richard described concerns about missing company funds, secret transfers, manipulated reports. Millions of dollars moved through accounts he no longer controlled. He named one person repeatedly: Charles Whitmore, current board member, Victoria's closest advisor, the man who appeared at nearly every executive meeting, the man she trusted. Attached behind the letter sat years of evidence, transactions, signatures, internal records, enough to destroy careers, enough to expose fraud, enough to save the company. Suddenly, the Rolls-Royce made sense. The compartment, the hidden key, the strange repairs. Richard Sterling hadn't hidden money. He had hidden the truth. And then I reached the final page. There, written beneath his signature, was the answer to the number. My breath caught. Richard had hidden everything exactly 179 days before his death. Not as a code, as a countdown. A final message left by a father who knew his time was running out. And I finally understood why the key said 179. For 2 days, I carried the secret alone. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to know who I could trust. The documents remained hidden inside my workshop toolbox, locked, protected, waiting During that time, I watched people more carefully than ever, especially Charles Whitmore. Once you know the truth about someone, small things begin to stand out. The way they control conversations, the way they redirect attention, the way they smile without warmth reaching their eyes. Charles had mastered all three. 3 nights later, Sterling Automotive hosted a charity gala inside the estate ballroom. The event was supposed to celebrate leadership, community investment, and the future of the company. In reality, it felt more like a campaign event. Board members, investors, political donors, rich people shaking hands with other rich people. Meanwhile, I stood beside Victoria as part of the image she had purchased 6 months earlier. The devoted husband, the stable family man, the mechanic who had somehow become acceptable because he fit the story. At one point, I noticed several guests speaking directly to Victoria while ignoring me completely. One man even asked her a question about the Rolls-Royce restoration while I was standing less than 3 feet away. She answered politely, then said something unexpected. "Ask Malcolm. He's the expert." The room grew quiet. The man looked embarrassed. For the first time, Victoria didn't allow anyone to treat me like the help. That should have made me happy. Instead, it made what came next harder. Later that evening, Charles approached me privately. No cameras, no audience, no performance. Just the two of us. "I hear you've spent quite a bit of time around the estate lately," he said. I didn't answer. His smile tightened. Then he named a number. An amount of money large enough to erase every financial problem I had ever faced. Large enough to secure Ava's future. Large enough to change our lives forever. "You walk away," he said quietly. "You forget whatever you've found." There it was. Confirmation. Not suspicion. Not theory. Proof. My silence told him everything. His offer became a warning, then a threat, then another offer. More money. More promises. More reasons to betray myself. But all I could think about was Ava, about the birthday card in my pocket, about the example a father leaves behind. Because my child was watching, maybe not at that exact moment, but eventually. Children always see who you become. That night, Victoria found me sitting alone inside the carriage house. The old Rolls-Royce stood between us. "You've been distant," she said. I nodded. "Malcolm." For the first time, her voice sounded vulnerable. This arrangement stopped feeling like a contract a long time ago. I looked away, because hearing that hurt more than Charles's threats. If I exposed the truth, everything would change. If I stayed silent, everything I taught Ava about integrity would become a lie. After Victoria left, I walked upstairs to my room. I opened the closet, pulled out a suitcase. Then I walked into Ava's room and began folding her clothes, because I had finally made my choice. And that night, on day 179, I started packing my daughter's bag. The board meeting began at 9 o'clock the next morning. Day 180, the day everything was supposed to end. Outside the headquarters building, reporters waited behind barriers. Inside, executives moved through polished hallways carrying tablets, reports, and carefully prepared speeches. Nobody knew a hidden brass key was about to change the entire meeting. I arrived early. So did Ava. She sat quietly beside me in the lobby reading a book while I carried a leather folder containing Richard Sterling's letter and every document from the lockbox. I remember looking at her and thinking, how strange life can be. 6 months earlier, we had been eating cereal above a small garage. Now we were walking into a boardroom worth more than every building on our street combined. But some things hadn't changed. I was still a father, and she was still watching. The meeting started routinely. Financial reports, votes, presentations. Then Charles Whitmore stood to recommend several leadership changes that would quietly give him greater control over company operations. Everything was proceeding exactly the way he wanted, until Victoria interrupted him. "Before we continue," she said, "there's something this board needs to see." The room fell silent. She looked toward me. Not as an employee, not as a temporary husband, as someone she trusted. I stood and placed the brass key on the conference table. Several board members exchanged confused looks. Charles didn't. His face lost color immediately. That told me more than words ever could. I handed Victoria the folder. Then she began reading her father's letter aloud. Every page struck the room like a hammer. The hidden accounts, the missing funds, the forged approvals, the years of manipulation, and Charles's name appearing again and again. By the time she finished, nobody was speaking. Charles tried. At first he denied everything. Then he blamed former employees. Then he claimed the documents were fabricated, but evidence doesn't care about excuses. The records matched, the signatures matched, the transfers matched, the truth matched. For the first time in years, nobody in that room believed him. Security escorted him out less than 30 minutes later. The most powerful man in the room became the loneliest. And all because of a small brass key hidden inside a forgotten Rolls-Royce. After the meeting ended, people gathered around Victoria. Lawyers, directors, reporters. Everyone wanted something. I didn't. I simply wanted to leave. As Ava and I reached the elevator, Victoria caught up to us. Her eyes looked different, less guarded, more human. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" "For the way I first saw you." I didn't answer, because the truth was, her apology mattered. But it couldn't erase the past. She glanced at Ava, then at the suitcase standing beside us. Realization crossed her face. "You were really leaving?" Yes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The company had been saved. The truth had been uncovered. The hidden secret was finally gone. But the hardest goodbye was still ahead. An hour later, Ava and I stood beside my old pickup truck. The same truck that had carried us through life long before Sterling Estate entered the picture. Our bags were loaded. The contract was over. And for the first time in 6 months, the future felt uncertain again. Strangely, I was at peace with that, because uncertainty has never frightened me. Compromising who I am does. Ava climbed into the passenger seat, then paused. "Dad." "Yeah, are we doing the right thing?" Children ask simple questions that adults spend years trying to answer. I looked at the estate behind us, the mansion, the wealth, the opportunities, everything we were leaving behind. Then I thought about the birthday card she had made, the one that still rested safely in my pocket. "Dad, you're my safe place." I smiled. "Yes." She nodded. That was enough for her. Before I could start the engine, another sound echoed across the courtyard, a deep mechanical rumble. Familiar, powerful, alive. Both of us turned. The old Rolls-Royce Phantom emerged from the carriage house. For the first time in years, it was moving under its own power. The restoration was finally complete. Sunlight reflected across the chrome. The engine ran smoothly. Steady. Confident. Like it had been waiting for this day. Victoria stepped out after parking it. She walked toward us carrying something in her hand. The brass key. The small object that had changed everything. The object everyone else had overlooked. The object that revealed a father's final warning. The object that exposed a hidden secret and saved an entire company. When she reached us, she held it out. "It belongs to you." I shook my head. "No. It was your discovery. It was your father's message." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she closed her fingers around the key. Tears filled her eyes. Not dramatic tears. Not movie tears. The quiet kind that arrive when a person finally understands something important. "My father trusted someone he hadn't even met yet," she said softly. I nodded. "Good men usually do." She laughed through the tears. Then she looked at Ava. "Thank you for sharing your dad with us." Ava smiled. "He's pretty great." I couldn't argue with that. As we prepared to leave, Victoria asked one final question. "Was any of this ever about the money?" I looked at my daughter. Then at the restored Rolls-Royce. Then back at Victoria. No. And that was the truth. Because the most valuable thing I carried away from Sterling Estate wasn't a contract, wasn't a mansion, wasn't money. It was the certainty that my daughter had watched her father choose dignity when nobody would have blamed him for choosing comfort. Years from now, she won't remember financial reports or board meetings or hidden accounts. She'll remember the lesson that a working man's hands can fix many things, but character is what holds a family together. And sometimes the most important thing a father teaches his child is knowing when to walk away. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated because of your job, your background, or the car you drove? Have you ever had to say no to something that looked good on the outside because it didn't feel right inside? Or have you ever discovered that one small thing, a note, a photo, a key, or a simple conversation changed everything you thought you knew? Share your story in the comments below. I read more of them than you might think. And if you believe that dignity, fatherhood, hard work, and doing the right thing still matter, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more stories that remind us what real strength looks like. Until next time, take care of the people you love.